Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And when it comes to TV dads, there's a strong tendency for them to be stubborn. And from an overall narrative perspective, that makes sense. Many shows, especially those seeking syndication, need their main characters to be consistent, if only to maintain a certain tone or theme. While that might help a show extend its run for multiple seasons, it also comes with side effects. Stubborn characters, especially father figures, also tend to be uptight and rigid, and even come off as outright assholes who are hostile to anything that's even marginally different than what they're used to. But then, there's a character like Hank Hill from King of the Hill. And on the surface, he comes off as a typical TV dad. He tends to be uptight and uncompromising. He's stoic, set in his ways, and inherently skeptical of anything new or trendy. In addition, he's very transparent with his conservative leanings. He's even proud of them, never missing an opportunity to espouse his views. But at the same time, Hank Hill does a lot to set himself apart from most TV dads. He is not a bumbling idiot, although many of his friends and associates often are. He's also not a loudmouth blowhard when it comes to his opinions. Sure, he'll share them when the situation is appropriate, but in general, Hank is reserved, patient, and mindful. Given the various antics of his friends, family, community, and coworkers, he kind of has to be. By so many measures, Hank Hill lends himself to much more complexity than most characters. He has the look, persona, and general demeanor of a man determined to avoid change and nuance. But throughout multiple seasons of King of the Hill, he proves that it is possible for him to be a reasonable man while still maintaining his core traditional values. That often takes effort, but that effort often makes for endearing growth and memorable comedy every step of the way. It's one of the many reasons why King of the Hill has stuck with me over the years. I can still rewatch old episodes and appreciate them in ways I probably couldn't have when they first aired. It's also one of those unique shows that has aged remarkably well despite being a product of its time. And with respect to Hank Hill, he's one of those rare characters that I've come to respect more and more as I've gotten older. It really does speak to the quality of King of the Hill as a show. It also reflects what I think makes Hank Hill work so well. Yes, he may be stubborn most of the time, but he is still reasonable when it's warranted. He can be persuaded of something if it's argued in the right manner. He can come around to another point of view if it has merit. He can even be thoughtful and empathetic despite being averse to most displays of emotion. The fact that he can do all of this in a way that's often funny, that's just a bonus. Now, that's not to say he's always reasonable. There are numerous episodes where Hank's stubborn nature can come off as, well, asinine, if that's not too fitting a word. In one episode, he got irrationally upset when a family dared to sit where his family usually sits at church. That led to an elaborate plot that exposed the strange and glitzy world of megachurches. Not surprisingly, Hank didn't ultimately care for this brand of religion, not just because it was different than what he was used to, but because it failed at delivering what he believed church should be. In the end, Hank managed to work things out. He and his family ended up back at their preferred spot, but that was one instance where his unreasonable stubbornness exposed the flaws of megachurches in general. It led him right back to where he started and where he wanted to be. But the fact that it started with someone else sitting where he preferred to sit, that just shows how rigid Hank can be. But there are other cases in which Hank does come around from his stubborn ways. A few even reveal the larger complexities of his character. And those moments often make for some of my favorite episodes of the entire series. One episode in particular, Chasing Bobby in Season 5, really demonstrates Hank's emotional side. And for a man rarely comfortable with emotions, that's really saying a lot. The episode revolves around Hank's truck, for which he's had a strong affinity since the first episode. Like his mower, his home, and his job selling propane and propane accessories, Hank sees his truck as part of his identity. So naturally, he is very protective of it. Whenever it breaks down, whenever it shows his age, it's a big deal for him. But he is not inclined to take it to a mechanic. He always prefers to fix it himself. He does not like the idea of someone else poking around in his truck. To him, that's no different than someone breaking into his home. And at times, his attachment to his truck seems deeper than those he has with his friends and family. But, like all vehicles, including ones made in America, his truck's age eventually catches up with it. And by this episode, it is on its last legs. Just like he always does, Hank attempts to fix it. And whenever someone dares to suggest taking it to a mechanic, or, God forbid, getting a new truck, he rebuffs it immediately. However, Hank still realizes on some level that his truck just cannot keep going. In one of the very few emotional breakdowns he's ever had on the show, he starts crying when this becomes painfully apparent. This causes some serious concern that his love for his truck exceeds even his love for his son. And given the extent of this emotional reckoning, that's not an unreasonable observation. Throughout this show, Hank is shown to be extremely reserved with his emotions. So much so that he rarely expresses them to other people. That's not to say he's emotionally stunted. He will show emotions to his truck, his dog Ladybird, and football. But these are all things that cannot respond in kind with similar emotions. It also doesn't help that Bobby's emotional intelligence is limited, even for a preteen, or that Peggy's emotional insights tend to be blinded by her inflated ego. But as soon as his truck is involved, these feelings become inescapable for him. It may seem misguided to some, but it's not at all uncommon for people to become emotionally attached to their cars. Most people probably know someone whose car or truck is tied up in their identity. And for Hank, it's a much bigger part of his identity than most. That makes it all the more tragic when his truck is ultimately destroyed after getting stalled on some train tracks. This leads to an emotionally charged moment between Hank and Bobby. Hank actually blames Bobby for killing his truck, and yeah, he used that exact word. And Bobby is so guilt-ridden about it that he tries walking home, even though he's never been one for physical activity. Once Hank realizes this, and understands how hurtful his words were to Bobby, he goes after him. But that required him to go back to the same truck dealership that he despised being at moments earlier. He then is allowed to test drive a new truck, and with it, he's able to find Bobby through a storm. Along the way, he learns firsthand how well this truck handles. It has better brakes, better features, and even seat warmers. This culminates in a great moment between him and Bobby. Together, they reflect at how the old truck's time had come. They had to let it go. And Hank, as attached as he was to that old truck, he was able to do so. For others, this might not seem like a big deal, buying a new truck after the old one is destroyed. But that truck was such a big part of Hank's personality. He literally cried over the state of his old truck. For him to be able to move on with a new truck, that takes more than just being reasonable. It takes a certain amount of emotional resolve. But it's not just his truck that can get Hank to come around on certain things. In one of my favorite episodes of the whole series, Raise the Stakes in Season 12, Hank's stubbornness is tested through another key component of his personality, grilled meat. Now, this is not just a part of Hank's identity. This is a critical aspect of that proud Texas spirit that Hank champions. But when the Megalomart starts selling inferior steaks that don't taste very good, even when cooked with quality, clean-burning propane, that's a big deal for him. And when the Megalomart fails to address his concern, as is often the case throughout this show, he finds himself turning to a grocery co-op. In terms of environment, this is probably the last place Hank would ever go. It's co-run by a man named Appleseed, an old-school hippie whose views are antithetical to Hank's on nearly every level. But when he sees that they use real, organic meat, prepared by a skilled butcher and made from cows that are treated ethically, he doesn't need much persuading. Once he tries these organic steaks for himself, he is swayed almost immediately. And so is his family. They're also taken aback by how good these steaks are. The fact that they come from a hippie co-op run by people they never usually cross paths with, that's not an issue. And even while he's helping Appleseed out of the co-op, Hank isn't one to judge or admonish them for being so different. He also doesn't try to convince Appleseed to abandon his hippie ways. Even if he's a staunch Reagan-style conservative at heart, Hank follows a strong live and let live mentality. And if there's merit or value to what others offer, he will listen. He may even try it. Throughout this particular episode, Appleseed and his cohorts often annoy or confound Hank. Things even get awkward when Hank accidentally makes the co-op more successful, simply by applying his trademark work ethic. But in the end, the merits of good meat, quality food, and satisfied customers is plenty to sway Hank Hill. It doesn't matter if it comes from a long-haired hippie. It matters if there's a good reason to believe in the results. This episode, more than most others, shows just how balanced King of the Hill often is when it comes to dealing with other worldviews. In some episodes, it pokes fun at uptight busybodies obsessed with political correctness. But in others, it's just as critical about uptight religious zealots who want to ban Halloween. It all comes back to how reasonable or asinine something is. For Hank, that's the crux of his stubbornness. If someone makes a reasonable argument, or if something seems reasonable after a bit of scrutiny, he will give it a chance. He might not embrace it completely, but he will try something if there's a possibility that it might work. And when it comes to people, Hank is not the kind of person who demands that everyone bend over backwards to accommodate him. There might be times when he is a bit too rigid, like he was during the church episode, but for the most part, Hank is fine with letting people be who they are. He does not have a hostile reaction when he finds out Dale's father is gay. He doesn't get incensed when he finds out the new pastor at his church is a woman. He is, at heart, a reasonable, decent man who doesn't judge, shame, or demean. But if someone dares to be a bully, make asinine arguments, insult his friends, his family, or his home, or God forbid, grills with charcoal, well, Hank Hill can only be so reasonable. He is very willing to kick someone's ass when they deserve it. And that's just not the mark of a proud Texan. It's the mark of a compelling, well-rounded character. And it's a beautiful thing, I tell you what. Thanks for watching, everyone. And thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, take care and stay safe.